Hey everyone, I'm Brian Austin Green.
I'm Sharna Burgess.
And I'm Randy Spelling.
And you are listening to Oldish, an iHeartRadio podcast. Hello everyone.
What's up?
Welcome back once again to episode 3 of Oldish.
It's going to be we're at episode 3.
Episode 3. The last one that we did was 2.5.
Oh, that's right. You keep throwing in the decimals. You're going to throw me off.
Yeah,
every time.
you.
Okay,
yeah,
we're on
you.
3. That's right.
You do. Again, we're positive here, but you do suck a bit at math. So I'm glad that you're out of school, that you made it through, and that you graduated with whatever math degree you did.
I'm so glad. No math degree, and I was always better at English and writing and.
Me too, Randy. I'm on your page. I was always better at English and writing and the creative stuff. But I'm really, really excited about this episode today because we are talking about a subject that I think everyone experiences in one way or another. But Randy, you have a big story to share today, and I'm so excited to learn along with you sharing it because I don't know all of your story. Our subject today is addiction.
Listen to these stats real fast. I just want to read this. According to U.S. News, 2/3 of Americans say their lives have been affected by addiction. It's a big number.
It's a big number
of Americans.
It's a really big number.
And I mean, addiction comes in tons of forms. Gambling, alcohol, drugs, smoking, fame, gaming,
social media.
Yeah.
Porn.
So I'm assuming then that this is going to be a multi-episode topic, which we'll, I'm sure, get back to at a later date in 15, 20 different ways.
Yeah. And we'll just be sharing experiences in this one. And of course, we'll open it up for people for our reaction episode. But Randy, talk to us about how and what and when and where, all the things.
Yeah, please.
And before we even start, thank you for sharing and for being so vulnerable in this space and sharing your story. I really appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So first of all, before deep diving into my story of addiction, I just want to take a quick moment to sort of destigmatize addiction, because I think still, you hear the word and it's like, oh, addiction. And it has this stigma of something really horrible and bad, which it can be. But it's, we deal with this almost daily, whether it's smartphones, whether it's social media, whether it's sugar, whether it's food or porn or gaming or all the things that you just read, Brian. We all go through this in some way, even if it's just addictive thoughts. We get addicted sometimes to thinking about things, thinking about problems, ruminating, obsessing. And so I would just love for everyone to sort of open up to my story. Might not have exact relatability, but where can you relate to it, right? Where in your life do you know someone? Do you have a family member? Do you have a friend? Do you go through certain types of addictive behaviors? We don't have to go as far as to say you have an addiction. But, we all kind of navigate addictive behaviors in this day and age. So I think it's a really important topic to discuss. Mm-hmm. So for me, my addiction started, I think, the first time I drank alcohol. Obviously, I wasn't addicted when I first started. So my first sip of alcohol was at 13. I believe it was actually at a rap party for 90210. And you all were older and having drinks. And I think someone gave me their drink. I don't remember who it was, and I took a sip. I was like, oh, okay, I'm cool, right? I'm with all the older people. I'm cool. And then a couple weeks later, a friend of mine from school, I was in 8th grade, nearing the end of the school year, and we were supposed to get together with these 2 girls to come over and watch a movie or something, and they stood us up. And I look back now thinking, why did we then go downstairs? We found a bottle of whiskey, I think it was, and just started drinking it from the bottle. I mean, it was insane. Well, why did we do that? Like, what was the association with these 2 girls stood us up? We're going to go down and drink. And I think part of this is because we look back to movies from early on. Someone loses their job. Someone is upset. How do you deal with it? You go to the bar, you get a drink
at the bar and drink.
right? You go and you pour this glass and you have this brandy and they're drinking because they're stressed out. This was in my thought process. So we did this. Why I think it took hold though, because then over the summer I drank a few times and I remember just thinking, yes, it was fun to a degree, but it gave me something that I didn't have. And it gave me a false sense of self. It gave me more confidence. It gave me the ability to not feel so vulnerable and so raw. And
sorry, Randy, how old were you at this point?
I was 13.
13
still 13. Okay.
Still 13. So as someone
Wow.
who grew up super sensitive, empathic, I could feel other people's emotions. I could read people's emotions. Sometimes I could even hear thoughts. And so for me, it was really confusing navigating all of that. I didn't have the context or the language of what to do with that. But it was like, the best way I could put it is it's like walking around being an exposed nerve, like a tooth that has no enamel and just getting stimulation and feeling all the time and not knowing what to do with it.
Yeah.
So by the time I found substance, it had the ability to numb me.
It was the
enough.
enamel.
Yeah. So I didn't have to feel that. Cut to, out of high school, I started experimenting with other drugs. And this went on for a while. I still did what I did. I was an actor, so I was still working on television shows and doing what I had to do and would just sort of play around on weekends.
So you're around 18, 19 at this point?
18, 19. The addiction didn't really start to go downhill and become problematic until I was 21.
Gotcha.
I was off of a TV show that I was doing a few movies here or there, and I started drinking too much to the point where, then I was taking drugs and drinking, and I would end up passing out. And it was really embarrassing because I would be at some sort of function and then, they would find me passed out in the corner and be like, hey, are you okay? And then I would come to. And the shame that I felt around having to face the people looking at me was horrendous. But it wasn't enough to stop because at that point, the addiction completely took hold. Because I had been drinking and using drugs kind of sporadically up until that point, I kind of stunted myself emotionally. So I had no idea how to express myself, how to deal with feelings, how to deal with a lot of the pain that I felt inside my whole life. And so now I had to use something. It wasn't even a choice anymore because not doing it wasn't an option. So then cut to just going out to clubs and partying in Los Angeles.
How often did you use? Every day?
I didn't use every day. It was kind of a weekend thing. But then it started, when it became problematic, it got to the point where, a Friday, Saturday became a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And then sometimes it would creep in on a Wednesday. And it got dark. It got really bad. My friends, I have them kick down my door a couple times in the apartment that I was living in. One time I woke up on the street and there was a fire engine there, and I had 4 firemen looking over me in broad daylight at 4 p.m. saying, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I kind of came to and then, walked off. And it led me down a pretty destructive and dark road. I think a lot of my friends thought for sure they were going to come in and find me dead one day.
Mm. And were you still very much, you said you're, emotionally stunted, but what do you feel like you were escaping when you were using? Because I feel like that's what drug and alcohol very much becomes a part of. You're escaping something. What was that for you?
I think I was escaping the void of not enough. hence why I wanted something external to put in me to fill this internal place that, of course, you can't fill with any sort of substance or item or thing. But I didn't know how, so I just was reaching for anything I could find. And also, I can't blame my upbringing. I'm not going to sit and blame my parents for what they did or didn't do. All I can say is that coming from a family with an uber successful father, right? I mean, uber successful. And my sister was successful and just knew what she wanted to be. I didn't know myself well enough. I was very chameleonic. I would show up and, sort of sense who you wanted me to be and try and play that part because I wanted to fit in or I wanted to be liked. And so for me, it was really trying to find my place. And when I couldn't find my place, I kept changing what I was doing for work. And I was an actor, and it was like, you need to do movies to be more important. So I did movies, and I'm like, nope, I don't feel any different. Then I started doing music and producing artists. I was like, I'm going to control my own destiny and put out music that I really love. That's going to make me feel good, and I'll be a little executive. And I remember putting my feet up on my first office and the desk, and I was sitting there and poster on the wall, and I felt very official. And then the next day came.
The hole was still there.
The hole was still there. And it became so painful that, I just kept filling it with everything I could.
What do you think was your lowest point? What was your rock bottom?
I'd say my first intervention with my family was a rock bottom.
Intervention in the sense of what
my parents, my sister, my girlfriend at the time, a couple of my friends came to my apartment and sat there and read notes and said, we, want our son back, our friend back. And so I went to rehab. I went to treatment for a month, but I was young. I was 23 and I just wasn't ready at that point to give it all up.
You didn't see it. Did you not see it as a problem? You thought their perception was
I
the
romanticized, right? I was like, but what about if I'm in Hawaii and there's a sunset and can I just have a cocktail or a glass of wine? I knew it was a problem, but I wasn't ready. So I couldn't admit it to myself that I couldn't change on my own.
Yeah. And so you went to rehab at around 22, 23. And how long did you stay clean?
2 weeks.
Right.
I stayed clean for 2 weeks. I went right back because rehab treatment is great to get you out of the environment and get you to start looking at things. But 30 days to then be thrust back into your environment with all the same cues that get you to
triggers,
drink or use in the first place, they were still there. So I have two rock bottoms. I mean, one was definitely, I was like 3 a.m. I was with some friends who I didn't even know, people from a club, right? And mixed, male, female. And it was like 3 a.m. and they said, let's go back to my house. And I had no business driving, but I said, oh, I'll drive. And I was intoxicated. I had just done cocaine, which I had never done really up until that point. I didn't like it. And a woman was there and gave it to me. And again, I was like, oh, okay, I did this. And then I did, and I was drinking. And then I did another drug called GHB, which was sort of a workout drug. It was also known as this, like the date rape drug, because it would make you pass out.
Yeah. So
I was driving, and then at some point, I have no more recollection. My car was on the off ramp of Havenhurst in the valley with my foot on the brake, and I was passed out for 20 minutes before the police came. So I'm so thankful that I didn't hurt anyone.
Right.
All that had to happen was my foot. If my foot came off the brake, my car would have gone speeding into someone for sure. So I really believe that I was being looked out for and protected by by some force that night. That was a low point for me. My breaking point was my father passed away in 2006. I was shooting a reality show that it just wasn't me. I'm not a reality show guy. And I was told at the time, this is what you're supposed to do for your career. And I just was like, oh, okay, I'll do it. And it just, so many things about it felt not in alignment with who I was and disingenuous. But here I am doing this show. And my father passes away while I'm filming the show. I'm drinking, I'm using, I am a hot mess trying to keep it all together, but I'm not. Like, I think I'm functioning, but I'm really not functioning. Spinning out of control. Now my father passed away. There was a lot of hubbub in the media, internally with my family at the time. And I just had no outlet, no way of dealing with it. I felt so completely out of control on all levels. And now my father, this big figure, is gone. And about a week or two after, it was 4 a.m. I was in my place. I was alone. Everyone had gone away. And I felt so utterly alone. And I fell to my knees and I just said, basically sobbing. And I said, I don't know who can hear me. I called my dad Pops in his later years in life. And I said, Pops, if you can hear me, anyone, please help me. I really believe in my heart that I'm here for more. I really believe that. And I have to just add this, from about 18 to 21, 22, I really dove deep into a practice of meditation and spirituality. I mean, I really went deep. I had some beautiful, fantastical almost experiences that happened to me. And if I didn't have those, if I wasn't aware of this force and this connection, and I wouldn't know that existed. So I would just think this is life and I'm done. But I knew it, and I connected to that. So I said, I really believe in my heart that I'm here for more, and I want to help people. I want to make an impact in some way. I don't want my life to be like this. But please help me. I don't know how to make that happen. And I don't remember anything after that. But about a week later, I checked myself into a treatment center that I chose. It was in Utah. I left Los Angeles, went to Utah, supposed to be there for 30 days. I think I ended up being there 60. And then I came back and I tried really hard. I knew that this time was different. I relapsed 1 or 2 times, and then that was it. And the scariest part of all of this was not getting clean. It was, how do I live? Who am I?
Who am I?
What do I want to do with my 3rd, 4th, 5th, 20th chance that I have now? I don't know even who I am. I have to relearn how to live from basically when I was 13 all the way up until my 27-year-old self.
So how did you face that question? That's such a big question. And so heavy too, when you're coming out of rehab and you're trying to change your life and you feel it's different. But it's also one of those big daunting questions that I think some people can crumble underneath and go back into hiding. So how did you face that big question of what now?
I had one guiding principle, and this might not work for everyone. My guiding principle was, I've lived the way that I thought I needed to. I blended in how I thought I should. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm going to live from my heart. It's scary. It's vulnerable. I might not always make the right choices, but I really want to live from this place of authenticity. And that started me on a path. I was already in therapy, but I now went with a different attitude. I started diving back into books of all kind, from psychology to transpersonal psychology, metaphysics, spirituality. I changed my friend group at the time. I kept a few friends, but changed everything I was doing. And that's when I stepped away from acting and entertainment. And I said, do I really want to do this, or at least do it in the way that I'm doing it? And I was pretty clear that I didn't. And then randomly someone suggested life coaching, and I didn't even know what that term was at the time. And when I reviewed what it was, I went home and researched, and I thought, great, I'll take this. It was like a 1.5 year program. And I said, great, these are great interpersonal skills, checks a lot of boxes. I don't think I'm going to become a life coach, but I'll do this. And through the process of learning and studying, what was suggested is coach as many people as you can. So that's what I did. And I started working with people, even though I was young, I was completely green. I didn't know what I was doing, but I got to see how powerful it was to sit with someone and ask them the right questions. And quick story. I think that the 10th person I coached, maybe it was the 8th or something, was a woman who I dated a little bit on and off. And I said, could I practice on you? We were friends. And so I asked her some questions, and she's telling me her story, and we started to get deep really quick. And I just thought, I'm so out of my element. What do I do here? And I'm trying to remember all my training, right? Like, don't do this, don't. And I'm totally being by the book, asking her these core tenets that I've learned in coaching. And then she said, can I just say something, Randy? And I said, yeah. And she said, do you know how many nights that I was with you, whether you were intoxicated or not? You have this deep sense of spirituality. I know how intuitive you are because I've experienced things that you have told me that you would never have known, that no one knew, and you picked up on it. Can you please just access that part of you? Or she said, can you ask me something from there? Can you share what you're seeing? And for the first time, I don't know if I felt seen or I closed my eyes and I waited and I took a deep breath and I got all of this information and I shared it with her, and she started crying. She said, thank you. That's what I really wanted. And
what an incredible moment.
That was where my coaching sort of changed into just being sort of like a typical coach. So like really using intuition when being with someone and accessing information that they have and sharing that with them.
I love that. Wow. She gave you permission to give yourself permission to be yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that is so beautiful. What an incredible gift of a moment to allow you to, that self-realization and for you to move forward. That's just so incredible. And how old were you at this point?
I was 20, I think I was 28 at this point.
28.
Yeah.
Wow. What an incredible story, Randy. You've been through so much.
What a huge story. I didn't know really any of that. I knew you when you were young, and then we lost touch, and I didn't know what it was that helped you find the you that you are today. But what an amazing story. What a brave
story
for you to share. I'm super impressed. Hats off to you.
Thank you for saying that. But I feel that my story is anyone else's story. You could see the differences, right? Like, Randy grew up with this or had this. It's not the point, because I struggled and suffered at the point of my lowest. Didn't matter what I had, right? I was totally in pain. I was suffering. I was deeply, deeply, deeply hurting and
pain
shackled,
is universal.
right? Like that is universal. If I can do it, I know that anyone who's listening, who is struggling with this or knows someone who is, that you can do it. I personally have helped hundreds of people do it. So I see it happening. I see it working. Biggest sort of jumping off point is knowing, believing that it can change. Because I think too many people just don't believe. They don't have a reference point for what life could be like. And I remember someone telling me early, like, "Oh, your life could be great, and without substances, you won't even know. Colors will be brighter." And at that point, it's like someone giving you advice, going, "Oh, just cherish every moment because it goes so fast." And you have a new baby and you haven't slept for 5 days, and you're like, "Yeah, I know, I do cherish every moment. I'm so tired."
Yeah,
right. I just wish that my baby was beyond this.
Right.
Yeah. I think it's when people are experiencing addiction, it's different for everyone, but I do think in the stories that I've known of people and my own, that the universe gives you signs and cues to check in and see if you're ready.
Yes.
You had those moments, whether it was your family's intervention and then it was you with your foot on the brake of the car. There is just the universe keeps giving you those moments to see, hey, are you seeing that you can step outside of this or where you're at? For me, the moment that I hit, and I was a teenager, I was very young when I went through drug abuse. And I was 17 years old, and this was at the end of probably being awake for 3 days. And we were sitting out the backyard of someone's house, and a crack pipe was being passed around with meth in it. And we were all taking hits of it. And I had been smoking meth now for a little while, not every day, but just on and off because it was new. This is over 20 years ago. And it wasn't as, may I say, as dirty as it is now. It was a newer drug and a lot cleaner. So it's not like I had it and I was hooked and I was on it every day, but it was definitely at that time a party drug and around all the time. And I was partying pretty much 3 to 4 days a week. Anyway, I was sitting there watching this pipe pass around, and the universe, God, whoever you call it, gave me this moment. And I saw everyone. I saw everybody sitting opposite me with complete clarity of what my future looked like. Here I was, 17 years old, high, awake for 3 days, watching 20-somethings and maybe even young 30-somethings passing around this crack pipe, just waiting to get a little bit more out of it. And I realized that I had come from being an Australian champion ballroom dancer. I represented my country at the World Championships. I was an athlete at the best in the country at the time. And because of a knee injury, I fell off. Much longer story. We'll do that another time. But I realized how far I'd fell and how much I needed to get back to that person, that this was not what I was meant for. You had that moment on your floor, on your knees. I am here for a reason. I am here for more. And I got given that blessing of a moment to see where I was at. And that was where it all changed for me. And I understood, I need dance back in my life. B, I need to get away from this space, because if I am around it, I will go back to it. I have no willpower with this. If it is around me, I will go back to it. And so I spoke to my family. I spoke to my mum. I moved to Melbourne, moved to an entirely different city, got back into dance. And that was where I'm so thankful, because the what now was dance for me. I knew what I needed to do. I knew I needed to get back into that, because that was always my vice. Like you, I was a very sensitive kid, very empathic. I had no idea at the time that these overwhelming emotions were other people's that I was feeling, but they were crushing me on the inside because I thought they were my own or about me. And that also went for things happening in my home as well, between my mum and dad. So I get away from them and I get back into dance. And thankfully I had that to guide me through. But that moment that the universe gave me was what changed everything. It wasn't my parents angry at me or worried about me. It wasn't friends telling me things. It wasn't anything that anyone else said. I was gifted this moment of clarity of I could change my life and I was meant for more. And I hope that those moments happen for everybody. That was my experience. And that is my experience with addiction. You coach people through this. And so I am not a doctor. I cannot coach people through it. I can only share my own experience. But I know that a person has to want to be ready to change and to face it,
Yeah.
How do you know when a person's ready to help them? I think that's a really big question for people that are suffering, have a family member or someone they love suffering with addiction. How do you know when is the right time to help them?
Oh, it's an important question. Thank you for sharing your story. Obviously, I didn't know that. And gosh, those moments when you have one of those, I actually have an out of body moment that I can share with you that happened so similar to what you're describing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just hopefully we can have those moments where you see yourself and go,
Yes.
okay, I now need to change this. For other people, knowing if someone's ready, I think I mean, there's so many things that you can do. And I'm sure the reaction video to this, the recap, when we take live questions, we'll get into this. But there's a willingness, there's an openness to admit that there is a problem and I want a solution. I don't want this anymore. I think someone has to be in that place of not wanting what they're doing, how they're living so badly that they're willing to get uncomfortable, because it is uncomfortable to step away from the crutch that you have, that you think is helping you, that's obviously not. It's very uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and everyone's kernel pops at different times, right? Someone might not be ready until they hit their absolute rock bottom. They might not be ready until they end up in jail or get a DUI.
Baby, looking back on that time, do you really trying to put yourself back in that space? Do you feel like maybe there were more moments than just that one that you describe as clarity? Like maybe the universe or whatever it is you believe in was continually giving you these little signs. Like Randy talked about when he was on the freeway ramp with his foot on the brake. He was having these little moments, and it wasn't until he finally had the one that was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back moment. Do you feel like maybe you had things leading up to that moment when you were sitting in that group?
There was definitely my God, it's like a lifetime ago.
I know, right? Doesn't it feel like another lifetime?
And hearing you talk about it, I'm like, I just cannot imagine that Sharna, because this is the one that I know and love, and it's so far.
It's so right. It's like a past life that I somehow have a glimpse of. That's what it feels like.
Yes.
There were definitely, there were so many moments that made me uncomfortable. And then I remember a moment, multiple of them, but I was always a great dancer, right? So there was always a circle that built around me and I was dancing, or the DJ would have me up beside the speakers because I was dancing and I would always get the crowd going. That always made me feel more amazing than any drug that I had taken that night, and then any cocktail of drugs that I had taken that night. It was always that factor that I loved. And I think that was the gentle nudge of like, hey, this is a way better source of joy for you than this. But I didn't pay attention to that at the time. There was definitely scary moments. There was a moment at a rave when I was incredibly dehydrated and had taken too many things and started oh my God, I never told people that. I started like frothing and foaming at the mouth a little bit because I was so dehydrated, and I didn't go into convulsions or anything, and they got taken over to the paramedics and they looked after me. But I remember thinking at the time, you sober up very quickly when you're in fear of your life like that, or at least I did. And it was like, I don't want this. I don't want this. I don't want this. I remember thinking that still wasn't enough for me to stop at the time. And I had so many triggers that sent me back into it, which was my home life and my relationship with my dad and the things that I was being told by him. And I was very, very uncomfortable in my reality. So I would escape to this place of euphoria. And eventually the things I would take to get to that place of euphoria weren't strong enough or enough, and I'd do more and have more and more often. And that was the slippery slope for me. So unfortunately, I'd have these moments of like, you can find a source of joy, or you don't want to do this, but then I'd go back to a space where I felt more uncomfortable, and I'd forget those moments that the universe gave me until it was so very obvious. And at this point, it had been about 2 years. I started when I was around 15. well, it started getting bad at 15. But at 17, I was a little bit older. I'd been in it for a little bit longer. It was getting a little darker and dirtier, seedier, the people I was around, the things, you know. And I was granted that moment that was just so obvious. But I don't really know how else to answer that question other than, yes, I would have been given these moments, but I don't think I was ready to hear them, see them, or listen to them because I was so uncomfortable in my space without that vice, that I didn't consider that it could be different or better for a while. I think it was when I realized that I was missing dance, that dance was the thing that kept me sane. When I was little and my parents were fighting, I would go and dance in my room with my headphones on. Dance was always the thing that kept me safe and sane. It helped me express when I was feeling too many things. It was my safe space. And I didn't have that for such a long time, a couple of years. And I realized that was that moment when I didn't have that anymore. I started losing not so much a sense of self, but my way of my therapy, right? I lost my way of working through things, even though I didn't know that at the time. And I think the strength came from realizing I needed to get back into that. Okay, now I have a solution. Now I know there's something I can replace A with, and I can put B back in there, and then I'll be okay. You know, instead of just like, I'm just going to cut this out and hope for the best. There was more of a plan. There was I'm going to get back into this, and I'm going to get away from here. And that felt more doable than just stopping, you know?
There's so much overlap with our stories in there was something else that you could go to. I'm going to fill this with dance. This is my joy. This is my place, my tool that I could use to work through some things. For me, it was spirituality, meditation, connecting with people. And so I think for anyone else, having that, because some people that's hard to find. Like, I don't know what that is, but if you could just find one thing, it's like one foothold, one thing that you can grab onto to say, it's drawing. I really liked drawing. Maybe just that is enough to create a little bit of space until you find the thing. But sometimes just having that one little tether point to tether to.
These addictions are almost, they sound like they're more like placeholders, really.
Yeah.
They're sort of like it sounds like you've really taken your eye off the ball for all intensive purposes. And so sometimes it takes these experiences to put your eye back on the ball of what it is that really brings joy that you're missing, that you are putting drugs and alcohol and stuff in the place of. And then just being open to the signs. I mean, you've talked about the signs. You always had those little moments where you knew in your heart that you saw the world in a different way and that you were meant for more, which is where you finally went to. For you, dance is where you finally went back to. And from that, you absolutely healed what it was you were putting yourself through before then. But unfortunately, it took that placeholder. And I think a lot of people that are listening to this, they have those placeholders too. And sometimes just to hear the story from someone else of that you guys had the exact same placeholders that they did, in different ways, but still it's in theory the same thing.
Yes. Yeah.
But in just looking at your surroundings and really being as present as possible within those moments, you were able to see enough clarity in what really meant something to you to decide to take the step. And it really sounds like that is what you guys had to ultimately do. It's taking that first step, which is a big one. It's a leap. It's a leap of faith going into it and going, okay, I'm going to give up this thing that has become like a security blanket for me and has temporarily filled a hole that I have. I'm going to give that up, have the hole back, And then I'm going to try and find the thing that really fills that hole that I'm missing in my life. And it's a big step. But I can only assume that having people around you, checking in, loving you, being a support system for you is invaluable during that time.
Very much so.
Sharna, did your parents know that this was going on? Did anyone try and help in any way?
Gosh, it's so hard. No, my dad, well, yes and no. My mum knew something was going on, and she had her assumptions and feelings, but she was so afraid of it. She didn't really know what to say. I was so, I don't want to say out of control, but yes, like you couldn't tell me not to go out. Like I was leaving. The way that things were with my dad at home by the time I was 15, it was all sorts of swearing at each other and yelling at each other and insults and the things he would tell me that I was nothing and worth nothing, and all of this. All of this and more. There was no way you could have kept me in that house and told me to stay in that space. And I think my mum also knew that, and she didn't know what to do other than to love me, other than to give me a safe space to say, I love you. Just text me and let me know you're okay. You don't have to tell me where you're going. Just text me and tell me that you're okay. I just need to know. Because at this point I'm leaving for days at a time. Knowing that I always had her love and her safe space to go to. The weekends that I would come home a complete hot mess and just cry because, coming down. And she would just hold me while I cried and not know what questions to ask, but just to hold me. And I wouldn't have answered any questions at the time, but I knew that she loved me and she was safe. Whereas my dad was the complete opposite, always angry, always pissed, always saying the next worst insult he could think of, kicking me out every 2 weeks because of, what a disappointment I was. So he escalated it and she soothed it, right? And I think if I had two parents that were, I don't know. I can't hypothetically give that. I'm sure there are people that have two parents that love them deeply and they still go through this. But I know that I was very grateful to have my mum there where she was a safe space for me to go to. And that, when I started my healing journey and when I started and I moved to Melbourne and I truly opened up to her about my experiences and what was going on with me, we began our deep friendship that it transcended mother and daughter. It became a bond like no other. There was complete honesty and transparency. And I thanked her for loving me and I thanked her for being there for me. And I don't know if any other method would have worked. I think I would have fought against everything else harder and harder because I was in a fight mode. That's what I was in. I was in fight mode. Fuck emotions, fuck feelings, fuck you. I am in fight mode and I'm going to survive this the only way I know how. That her being gentle and kind and loving allowed me to meet her in the middle somewhere and find that space of opening up. And that was a gift to know that she was there. And the healing of that goes long after not using anymore, not knowing how to deal with emotions, not knowing how to deal with life, dude. I had dance, but social interactions, dealing with emotions, things that come up, all of it was difficult. I was a baby again when it came to that stuff. I was an angry baby when it came to that stuff.
Angry baby.
And so there was so much growing and learning. And through all of that, throughout my 20s, she was my best friend and she still is. And I'm really, really grateful for that relationship with her because she just, all I can say is she loved me. She was my safe space and she held me when I needed it. She let me know that I was always thought about and that she would always be there for me. And again, it's like a past life I have a glimpse of. There's so much of it that I haven't revisited in such a long time, but I know that she was my shining light through it. And because she didn't push me, she didn't get angry at me. She didn't, some parents have taken their kids to a rehab center to see what they could turn out like. There's all the different methods that work. But for me, what she did worked, just loving me. And it must have been the hardest thing in the world for her to watch.
My God, it seems to me that anybody that has anyone close in their life that's dealing with any sort of addiction this way, it's one of the best things you can do is educate yourself. go to meetings, find the best ways that you can be
A support
kind
system.
and supportive and loving. Because that person that's in your life that you care so deeply about needs it. And the better prepared you are to help them deal with what it is they're struggling with and dealing with, the better, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
It sounds like it ended up being sort of people around in certain situations that really were the defining moments for you two.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with the intention of wanting to grow and change, I then attracted people into my world that helped support that vision. And there was always temptation. There were the people that came into my world that tempted through one way or another to go back to other things. Randy, I'm sure you experienced the same. But I was on the right path, and I thankfully had people supporting. And you are right. Knowing how to support someone, I think, is a really big deal. Randy, are there meetings for people like that where parents and friends of someone that's suffering addiction?
Al-Anon, right? For
there's
people.
Al-Anon. Yeah, there's places. I mean, there's support groups. There's Al-Anon. There's therapy. There's a lot of support.
Just take the time and look. Do a deep dive.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that information is available now. It's so much easier to find than at the point when you both were younger and it was you didn't even know where to begin. I mean, that information is available now.
It is. And, I think it's not just the person who has the addiction. It's the mobile that shakes. It's everyone around them, because witnessing someone go through that, I can't even imagine what it was like for my parents to watch this. I can't imagine as a parent what that would be like, because at some point there's really only so much you can do. Right?
I'm terrified of that. I'm terrified of our kids experiencing something like this. And that's a whole other thing. But
that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, that's a whole
I'll
other
tell
podcast.
you this. My wife and I were talking about when is the right time to discuss this with them. And I've held off. And a couple times they've asked me a question that I was like, oh, should I tell them now? And then a few months ago, we rented a little Airbnb by the coast here in Oregon, and it's the start of summer vacation. And I don't remember how it came up, but it came up, and I just looked at them, and then they asked me a question. Like, is there something from your past that you're not saying? I don't know, something like that. And I said, okay, here we go. And I didn't tell them every single detail. I didn't share all the details that I just shared with you, but I told them about my past with addiction, and I educated them. And it was a hard moment, because this was a little bit of a fall from grace moment, right? Here's a parent that they see me, and I think anyone who knows me now in my life, same thing. Like, what? You did what in your past? Like, the way that I live my life, the way that I feel, the way that I show up is so utterly different in every single way. All my healthy habits, you just would never know. So for my daughters who only know me this way, to discuss things like alcohol, drugs, spending a night in jail. I mean, these things that just sound so bad. And that is your father. This was what I went through. It was a hard moment, but...
Are you going to let them listen to this episode?
My youngest daughter loves old...
Does she really?
She keeps telling me, she's like, is today episode 3? We haven't done the 2.5 with the 3. She's like, episode 2, episode 3, is it out? It's out. Ooh, and she smiles. She really genuinely likes it. I think I am going to listen, because I don't want to hide. And what I've seen from working with people for so long, the stuff that's hidden that you don't say, doesn't mean that you have to tell them every detail, but the patterns that you don't talk about repeat. I'm just going to say that again. The patterns that you don't talk about, that you try and hide, repeat.
Yes.
So I think it's better to get it out there at the right time, in the right way, and talk about it, discuss it. Because the more that you can discuss it, the more insight they have to make their own choices.
Right.
And by the way, as a parent, I'm terrified. I think if I was growing up as a child right now in this day and age, the drugs that are out there right now, I would be dead. I wouldn't have the same chances that I had. I think it's very scary what's out there. So it's very, very serious. It's not a light thing.
I would love our listeners to know this is Randy shared his story and I shared some of mine, but this is addiction as a whole does not have to be drugs and alcohol. As we said, it could be social media, it could be so many things. And we absolutely want to hear from you guys. And if you are suffering with it, you know someone suffering with it. It could be someone is never off their phone, someone can't give up smoking, or someone is experiencing the deeper, darker side of addiction. But please, nothing is off limits. Definitely send us those questions.
Reach out to us, and we'll try and put as many things as we can on the Oldish Pod site. Just different
resources,
ways, different resources, ways of reaching out and helping.
Oh, and that reminds me, speaking of resources, I just want to say this. If you are struggling or someone you know is struggling and they need help with substance abuse, with mental health, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration National Helpline is 1-800-662-4357. It's free. It's confidential. It's 24/7.
What is that number again, Randy?
It's 1-800-662-4357. And it's a treatment referral and information service. There's so many resources out there, whether it's us, whether it's the number that we just gave, whether it's just going and saying, I think I need help in some way. Please reach out in some way, shape, or form, because I can tell you this, now having lived through it. One, I wouldn't change a thing. I don't want to go through it again. I don't necessarily want my children to go through that, but I wouldn't change a thing because I'm here today.
It's what we've talked about before. It's all of those missteps and those tough times helped create the people that we are today. And as difficult as they were at the time, we're here now, and we just want to help make a difference as much as possible. I love you both. I'm so, this was a hugely powerful episode to listen to hear your story, Randy, to hear your story. I'm so honored that I got to sit here and listen to it. So I think we should thank everyone for tuning in, for listening to the podcast. We'll be here. Oh, geez, for episode 3.5. Try doing math. Try doing math when you're emotional. My goodness.
I love you, baby.
And check in on the people that are around you. Love the people that are around you. Help them in every way you possibly can.
And we're in this together, right? I mean, even though we may not know each other, we all struggle. The reason why we're doing this, the reason why we're doing this crazy ambitious podcast schedule is because we all struggle together. That's the sameness that we all have. Life is beautiful. Life is amazing. And life can be really challenging and hard. And to have people that you can go to, listen to, talk to, who can help in some way, shape, or form is what it's really about and why we're here. So, Brian, thank you for listening. Sharna, thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing your story. And I think this is what Randy. We are here to do just each and every week, is to get real, raw, vulnerable, share our story, and hopefully it helps all of you who are listening. Thank you for listening.
Oldish,
you guys.
That's a wrap on that one. Thank you for being here, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Yes, you guys are amazing. Make sure you guys go and follow us on Instagram at @oldishpod. And you can also go and leave us a message at our own hotline, which is 855-OLDISH-3.
Make sure and write us a review. Leave us 5 stars if you loved it. Leave us 5 stars if you didn't.
We love 5 stars. We love 5 stars.
Yeah. We like 5 stars.
Yeah. See you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
See you next week, everyone.